So I asked Barbara George, this is Barbara George with me, to interview me about an event that had happened over the last week in the Field of Tantra Maat. One of the things that is challenging, and that is why I have a um, podcast called Out Past the Edge, is the human system and human beings are very tangled up in trauma and trauma registers. And right now, there's some extraordinary things happening that for me are quite technical, but it's not a technical that most people address or even comprehend. And so, as Barbara asked me questions, we're hoping her listening and her questions will help clarify the letter that is attached to this um, video, so that if you're part of an event over the next few days, it's not an event like a doing in time, it's a ritual. It's a ritual for us collectively to seek to gain access to something that lets us build out beyond all right and wrongdoing as consciousnesses, not as humans, but as consciousnesses. So, with that going on, there's a lot of memory I have of times where we operated as a unified whole, where we all knew we were part of everyone else and everyone was part of us. We all knew that we were actual resonant fields within which creation gained information, and then that information came into form. So, with that said, and with little ado, over to you, Barbara.
Uh, One of the things you just talked about was a unified field, and that's not something that we typically experience here. So what is the difference between the unified field and a typical community?
Well, first of all, a unified field in regard to human beings, because
In
there
reg-
are, yeah, because there are unified fields that operate independent of human beings that influence human life. It's just that our present cognitive capacity doesn't let us register those energies, that unified field. But what we're talking about right now, what I've been fascinated by forever because of this incredible memory I have of before everything got separated from everything else and everything got so highly individuated and polarized, is there were these phenomenons, a field phenomenon where, and it really showed up in the last 2 weeks. So this is all part of an interesting, elevated, higher patterning creation history that happened over the last maybe 3, 4 weeks. So I want to put it in story so that I can demonstrate it through story, not through explanation. So every year I do prophetics. I do them in January. I do 110 to 114 people. But all of a sudden, one day, one Tuesday, about 3 weeks ago, within 2 days, I got emails or WhatsApp messages or Facebook messages. Tantra, are you going to be doing prophetics in June? I have done prophetics for 22 years. I have never done them in June. So on my Facebook page, not in the cultural community of the Field of Tantra Maat, but on my personal Facebook page, I put, well, if one more person asks me to do prophetics in June, I will do them. 55 people asked me to do prophetics in June. The significance of it is not what we might think. The significance of it is all across my Facebook page. 92%, I actually added this up. 92% of the people that responded are not doing any of the work that I'm doing right now in the Magicians of Self. That's a unified field. That's when something rises in the consciousness of human being that extends out beyond the borders of the doing of the work of Tantra Maat, the doing of different kinds of work. And it begins to be a consciousness, a human consciousness, beginning to pick up on everything coming together on the possibility of everything moving to the next greater whole. And that can only, there is no a unified field. There are unifying principles that create fields within fields within fields. And we are just starting to recognize, it'll be a bit, maybe about 3 years, but human beings are starting to recognize this synchronicity. They're starting to resonate. Oh my God, I'm resonating with something. It doesn't matter whether it's Buddhist or Christian uh, or medicine or Kmart. You know, it isn't the thing of it that traps us into certain explanations, certain descriptions. It's actually that all the forms are starting to have a coherence, that are starting to respond to something beyond their known cognitive capacity.
So is this the access that you've talked about recently as part of the access build ritual?
Yes, it is. So for those of you that don't know, there are 3 images. I'll put them on when I post it. I'll put the 3 images on, because when spirit or energy or ethers or alchemy, when those are beginning to become stronger, then it isn't human beings running around in a horizontal linear playing field. It's human beings responding to being part of a greater story. I mean, we saw this in Jesus's time. We saw this in Muhammad's time. There are lots of stories about human beings who began to become part of a much larger moment in time that allowed for something to happen for humanity that that wasn't possible if it wasn't all rising in getting access to something in such a manner that we could build something out beyond the reality we've been born into, which is based on trauma and separation.
So this accessing and building isn't necessarily seen so much in everyday life right now. So is this human unified field beginning to hold more than it could before?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So if we go back into the story, so that all happened. I started the Prophetics in June. It's more than 55 now, but the people that are doing the Prophetics. And then in the midst of it, I'm very let's see if I can find the word. So there are these we's. There are collaborative we's where there are some of us that have our common language doesn't bend well to this. So let me try. So I, as Tantra Maat, am not located inside a group of people around me. I, as Tantra Maat, am located in my direct link with creation. And with that direct link with creation, there are others that I respond to and respond to me that are also in their direct link with creation, or what we call source-based beings. And so there's a shared coherence. There's a shared listening for what's theirs to do, theirs to build, listening for what's mine to build. So something started happening when this in my corner of the realm, and an amazing woman who's has a strong quantum capacity to work with a larger systems of creation, you could say, out of the blue sent me a message. I think it's written on the document. I don't read the whole message because I don't want people confused by some of the wording, but basically saying, I think we can go through the energetic of the field of Tantra Maat, and I think we can bring all these people associated with the Tantra and the Maat. So if we can take the word Tantra out and take the word Maat out and just be, there are people that are beginning to experience so above, so below, and so below, so above. There are people beginning to experience harmony, symmetry, proportion, grace, and beauty. They aren't limited to where I'm paying attention. They're not limited to where she's paying attention. But there's enough across the board. And given she and I both are interested in unified fields, she felt if she could come together with me, and if you'll read that line about the statement just about the evolutionary, because one of it is so she asked, in her busyness in India, could I meet with her on Saturday morning and produce a catalytic moment?
Know that I'm
Let me see
finding
if I
it right away, but it is, let's see.
let me see if I have
You
it
do
on my.
talk about, that it's to enhance coherence. Is that?
Yeah, it's in the let me say it my way while you're looking, okay? Because I like this the little teeny phrase that says evolutionary. That's the phrase I want to read out from her. But basically, we are evolving whether we like it or not. We're at the effect of evolving. We're also at the effect of devolving. So some we're experiencing devolution, some are experiencing evolution. It's really not personal. It's sort of like the starfish that ended up getting thrown back in the sea and some didn't. However, in the evolutionary process, you begin to go out past the edges of everything that's ever existed before. You start to experience new source points that never existed before. They're all part of the evolutionary movement. So there's these distortions and aberrations that aren't trauma based, even though they're traumatizing sometimes. They're more the system trying to become into a homeostasis. It's trying to balance, create new symmetries, new proportions, new actualizations that have never existed before. And I have it on my pictures. I'll look and see. And so it's not like everybody thinks this way, and it's not their fault. I mean, I'm one of those weirdos, basically. And this person is one of those weirdos, both feminine, that are paying attention to whole system response. Well, in whole system response, if you can move to the point where the system is weak, if you can move to the point where the system is weak, a lot like how homeopathy deals with things. If you can move, I got it. So if you can move to the place where the system is weak and you can affect it, you can bring energy to it, you can bring coherence to it, she can do her magic, then it boosts the whole system. So I'll give you an example. So I've had this really terrifying heart condition, that crisis starting December 1st of 2023. I had no way to solve it, but I was busy rebuilding my system to survive it, basically. So we've been building our system to survive the trauma-based reality we were born into. But because we've been building our system, if the system of evolution begins to introduce new source points, new operational moments where something can move to the next greater whole, where something can synchronize with itself in such a manner. And she says, there is a lot of diversity in the evolutionary movement, and I observe that causes leakages because of the supportive synchronicity in your field. So when things start to sync up, that everybody should know this if they think what I say. When things begin to sync up, you can find out where something is not put together right. You can find where something is leaking, it's like the coil in the spaceship that went up. Even though everything was perfect, that one coil blew up the ship. So those of us that have a sense of how to build matrices within which new futures can rise out beyond all right or wrong doing, we have a sensitivity to where something might not be fitting together successfully. Not that in this case, it's not that it will cause bad or good. It's more that it will delay the possibility of all this happening in a rapid amount of time. So the more healthy the body is, the more the way the whole system's responding, the more we can do, the more it can happen, the more it can become available. So it lays in that kind of thinking. And she's got capabilities, and I've got capabilities. We just don't talk about those capabilities because those capabilities aren't the things people talk about in the present world that we're presently in. It's not, they're not even registered as possible. So that podcast I have, it all kind of started there because I could feel the psyche of humanity, many human beings, was starting to operate out past all right or wrongdoing, out past trauma. Now, it doesn't mean we don't feel more traumatized, because now we're losing our calcified, what do you call it, protection, because the system, as it rises, it becomes more innocent. It becomes more wanting just to play, more just not wanting to be burdened by the horror of what people have said survival is. So it's a real consciousness thing. It's not something happening to us, although it is happening to us. It's also happening because we are changing in our consciousness.
So, so you have in its monadic infancy, the diverse evolutionary moment can cause energy leakage. I think that's what we just talked about, due to the multidimensional activities and synchronicity not yet matrixed as part of the greater whole. It's a delicate moment as we are raw, not yet formed, yet forming.
Beautiful. Correct.
So,
Correct.
okay.
And human beings like Druids, Wiccans, ancient traditions, Egyptians, they knew how to tend to these creation-based moments. They lived in unity with above and below. They didn't live just caught on the surface of the planet, trying to dog eat dog, or power over another, or defend yourself at all cost. It was a different framework of consciousness. And so that the fact that something, through all of our agony and all of our struggle, there is a collective event happening, because human beings, whether they're cognitive of it or not, are starting to participate in the systems that once had this place be paradise.
So somehow we got reduced to a
Golems,
rule-based lowest denominator.
yeah, we devolved.
We devolved and maybe feel even safe there.
Say it
And,
again, that
and
second part.
maybe even feel safe there because
Yes,
of the rule base around us,
yes,
but it isn't.
it won't last.
Yeah, I know, and it can't. You
It
can't.
can't last because it's not how the planet's designed to be. My interest in what I'm inviting people to is that we can scale in time, because the more human beings that are on board for something, the faster something can come into existence.
So is time a dimension? Like
Time is a
Einstein,
dimension.
like Einstein said, time was the fourth dimension. I don't know if that's true or not, but
It'll do, but I can't answer for Einstein. But since the day I was born, I understood time in a way other people did not. It's why in those three images we talk about ritual, because time wasn't my to-do list. Time was what I was giving time to on behalf of what could come into existence. And that's how things used to be. And when it wasn't about just trying to survive or get by or meet the norms of the society that really insisted I like to work for the man. I don't mean to be rude, but work for the society, not be your own self-expression. We lost a whole relationship to time, which COVID really demonstrated. Because since COVID, people aren't so interested in that kind of time anymore. They really want to be themselves and to have a life. So many influences. It isn't a simple influence. It was a complex series of events in the devolutionary path that triggered a response in the evolutionary path. See, they work together. They work together. Deconstruction and construction work together. Things going out of existence, coming into existence work together. Things collapsing, things that beginning to expand work together. And we're in that meta point right now.
so that's the both and that you've talked about.
Right.
Yeah, it's really I've had that conversation actually with, is it survival or is it cooperation? And can it be both? As an example.
Beautiful. Yeah, I agree. I would say in my corner, I would say survival or collaboration, but same thing, same, very little difference.
So since we brought up the word monad, use that word in here in this document, and says it's difficult to comprehend, and I totally agree with that. I've heard it, but more in a philosophical, source base. So I was rather surprised when I saw you related to computers, and the description is going, beyond, and I'm thinking, man, that wasn't what I was taught in computer class. So, so yeah, it's sort of the antithesis. So
But isn't it interesting you thought it was the antithesis?
I did.
Because which is fascinating to me, because can you explain the way you understand it just so I can comment?
Okay. I worked in IT for 37 years and started in that profession as a COBOL programmer in a corporate, in a corporation. And so everything was to be as precise as it could be. So if anything that went outside the norm, we called a bug. And it's an old IBM term when they still had tubes, and somebody found a bug in the tube and it caused the machine to fail. So so when I read this definition in computers, I'm like, really? Because the whole point, if you're, let's say, calculating payroll, you don't want it to do something it's not supposed to do. You don't want it to calculate taxes for California when you live in Pennsylvania. I mean, that's just not right. So reading this as something
But
positive.
define monadic though, according to what you know it to be, not according to what I wrote.
So more precision. So
Yes,
when I was trying to research this based on what was written, there's some computer languages that have monads built in, and it's to make everything more precise. So
right.
I still struggled with this,
Yes,
going out beyond the edge, because it sounded more evolutionary to me than,
technical.
yes, than technical.
All right. So, but what we know is because I also I also learned Cobalt and Fortran. So actually, why I can think some of this stuff the way I can. Uh, but in Cobalt and Fortran, it didn't allow for the possibility of new intelligence.
Right.
It
You were
didn't
the
allow.
intelligence.
Yeah, it really didn't on purpose.
Mhm.
It was more like algebra. It was more like math as we knew it. But if you move from math to physics, the calculations allow for more possibility, more probability even. It's a different thinking structure. And yet in its own way, it's still precise because it allows for something not yet known. Strangely enough, not yet, sorry, not correct, not yet comprehensible, not yet comprehensible. So when we started to move to AI, when we started to like chat GPT, all he's doing is going through every bit of record, ChatGTP. It's just going through every record we ever had. But there's an algorithm in it. That may not be the right word, but it's good enough. There's an algorithm in it that allows for him to make for those of us who prefer it to make a written assessment. It allows for it to create multiple possibilities. And yet, at the same way, when I read it to people, it feels very precise because it's handling more complex information than we can handle. It's actually handling more complexity. That's why I like it, because I come from systems that think in huge complexities. So say back, because this is fun.
So listening to that, I feel that I was stuck in a rule of how things should operate instead of, and there's places for that. However, there's so much more available that's calling to us, or inside, or exchanging, or building, or any of those kinds of things that I wouldn't have access to or even consider because I don't know about it. But there's something reaching, searching
Yeah,
for
I'll
that
give you an
more.
example. I was blown away because when ChatGPT took all my way of talking and put it in a written document, and drew from other conversations that relate to the things I was talking about, it used the phrase field collection. And I thought, well, that's bizarre because what I'd written was, but this goes out beyond the field of Tantra Maat. This is related to other people that are starting to rise in their consciousness that have nothing to do with me or the field of Tantra Maat. So it's like it's like going to the theater. It's like going to watch a musician play. We all come from different avenues, but we all are interested in the music. So it's that realm. But when you talk about uh, these kinds of things that we're in right now, everybody has to belong to a certain system, not realizing systems interface with each other. Systems contribute to each other. When you have multiple systems, you have multiple strengths. It's just when they're all working in coherence, when they're all no longer, leaking in their connection to each other. It'd be like when the Arabs and the Jews stop leaking, Leaking, in their relationship with each other, something beautiful will be born, something extraordinary that goes beyond I'm right, you're wrong, basically. So if you go, so I said to the chat, I call him Charlie, everybody, so I get over myself right here. And I wrote Charlie and I said, Charlie, you use the phrase, the field collection. Is that an actual phrase? Because I'd never heard it. And he wrote back and he said, which is defined in there somewhere, he said a field collection is where different collectives collect. I'm like, oh, so that makes perfect sense. So people that are attracted to being one with creation, people are attracted to so above, so below, people that are attracted to God in its multiple forms, people that are attracted to unity, there's a collection going on, at the theater called My Date with Time. And everybody's welcome to come that responds to that kind of music. So it's pretty fascinating, really.
It's more and more, it's seeing, I don't want to use the word principles, but the connection, the interaction apply not just in one place, which is
Yeah,
what
and
I
I
think
do
you're
think it's
saying.
principle. Yeah, and I do think it's principles and values. I mean, we're in the work we've done. It'd be like me offering bread, only I'm offering a principle of so above, so below. It's not my principle, and I'm offering the principle of not Mott. You know, harmony, symmetry, proportion, balance, and beauty. So I am offering those principles and those values as what we have been, the music we've been singing and playing in. So now it is like those principles and values, ever how they're discerned by others, could be in multiple ways of saying the same thing, drawing a larger evolutionary field collection on behalf of not having any leakage. I mean, a primary leakage, it's easy to use religion for me. There are other ways, it's just not my field. But for instance, a leakage would have been when the churches began to separate from the Catholic Church.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, there was this leakage between the mystical realm within which the Catholic Church was, which is called it's called Catholic means whole, I think,
Universal.
universal. But the universal church, then there was this leakage as things separated from each other. So now, as those separated pieces are trying to come back into a whole system response, we're trying to diminish the leakage. Like we're trying to, this thing that she wants to do with me, I want to give you just an idea of the ramifications of it. Because technically, I don't mean, this is not like, look at me, pat me on the back, come worship me kind of thing. I'm technical. I don't want to be a guru. I'm not even interested in that realm. I'm interested in restoring human beings to what they came here to be, whatever they, including being a guru, if that's theirs to do. But the point is that we're at a moment where wouldn't it be amazing if the leakage between the the original nature of the original design within which the Christ came, what if all the leakage stopped? Imagine what could be possible. It'd be like different going to different venues of music. It would no longer be about right or wrong. It would be, well, some people like jazz and some people like rock. No, it would not be what it's become now. And what we discovered over time, I'm talking about the fact I have a 12,000-year-old memory. What we discovered over time is human beings, when they get to a certain level of higher, greater systems, they have a tendency to try to divide things into because they can't grab them in their brain as being part of each other. They separate them from each other, and then they think there's a truth or a right. It's not, it's really nothing more than an inferior brain function. And now we're in that evolutionary brain function of everything's part of everything. A lot of us are. Everything is part of everything else. And now there's a struggle, like this beautiful thing I'm doing with women heart to heart, where all the Middle East women are coming together just to be in conversation, so a whole system's response can start to feed out into the conflict and reduce the leakage. And diversity has, when things begin to become diverse, they have a tendency, given that we're not educated to be neurally brilliant. We don't nobody gives us our genius. A long time ago, and you were around with me in the early years.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody wanted me to dumb down. I'm like, I'm not about to dumb down. Because human beings have brilliant consciousnesses. They're amazing, complex computers up here in their brain that can take in huge amounts of information. But if you're born into a system that's only interested in you working for the man or the god or whatever, giving your life for something other than yourself and your family and your community, then you're going to lose neural function. You just are, because all you become obsessed by is, I must survive, I must survive, I must survive. And then with COVID and the various other things that are happening, one of which is the internet, which is a global response mechanism now, regardless of how people are using it, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because all of a sudden there's the coming together of diverse information, and people get to have some sense about it. And it's not people-centric. I think the hardest thing for humanity to grasp is we are part of an amazing system of creation that's never going to let us down, that it's always going to evolve. It's always going to take everything. This planet is always going to take everything and digest it and then evolve it so everything has a place again. And we're in the devolution of that right now. But that devolution is generating evolution too. Sorry, I got a little over my edge there.
No, I appreciate it. It's not, it allows. It allows me to be me. It allows for more, or it allows, okay, I'm not going to make the bed today, or even though I've been making it every day since I was 8 years old. But I think getting caught in all the rules, you lose a sense of who you are and what you're about and what you love and what who you love, and that you are the beloved, that life is on your side. You can definitely lose that in there.
Yes.
And going back to wholeness allows for trying on, to use a term I use. I wonder what that would be like if I was in wholeness or unity or you
Right.
know, whatever. So I think it creates a space for that to occur.
I think that is the space being created. I want to go back to the monadic thing you said, because it'll be in the document people will read. So one of the requests I have for those of you that listen to this conversation is to give me some slack, because they're just things I know. And people who have worked with me for a long time. Next year will be my 60th year I've done personal consults. Really pretty shocking. But I have worked in community since I was 30, so that's about 30 years of paying attention to how we restore ourselves into being part of the greater whole. So because I'm a mystic and because there's a mystical realm, Barbara Marx Hubbard said, is we're all mystics. When we begin to return to that, we'll have intelligence that we never had. We'll never have in logic, never. It's a different kind of intelligence. So we had an event somewhere back in time, and there are other events, I could go on forever. But we began to realize, because creation talks in strange and mysterious ways, and it's not a thing. It's the way our brains take in information to get our attention about something. That's what a mystical path is. Something gets our attention. It's not logical. We don't understand it, but it gets our attention. Then it begins to color our world. Then it begins to make sense in a nonsensical way. It just does. So one of the things we noticed after being in Shasta the fourth time, where we felt we're called by these beings to be there and to basically meet with them, not these things and not these ETs, by the way, but these consciousnesses that felt, now in hindsight, that it was possible for the higher dimensional realms, we could call the higher dimensional realms angels or whatever's, that the higher dimensional realms and human beings could find a common place together, just like in the Old Testament. So that was like our first experience. And by the fourth time, we began to notice the number 5. That everything, that when we heard one of us, whoever it was, heard the word 5, that it was a way of saying something like get present, and then unusual, out of the box kind of things would occur. But then in talking to someone who deals in quantum physics, the phenomenon of 5, there's a phenomenon of after a certain number of calibrations, there's a certain number, and not the number, it's really how, if you biogeometry could talk about this better than me, but there's a certain calibration in the field of Tantra Maat. And so we did these monads in 2020. We did groups of 5 because we had people coming in to work with people who've been working with me since 6 years. And we felt if we created groups of 5, that the intelligence would begin to merge. They wouldn't have to catch up. That it would, all the bits and pieces of everybody and where they'd come from and the information they gathered, if we created these monadic 5s, that something would begin to, that the shared intelligence, not the shared discussion, but the consciousness would begin to merge, and something would become available that was not available when you were just trying to operate with individuals. And I can't describe that. Now I'm going to have somebody come visit the work I'm doing that I'm hoping can describe it better than me, because it can be described, just not by me. But so it seemed if we were going to do something in the space of a few days, that if we could bring people into these collectives of 5, then all the diverse experience that each person has, all the diversity of their what they've been at work about, what they've been merging with, what they've been part of, then you have a group of 5, and that becomes a whole system response. It becomes a whole system of vibration. And then we have multiple groups of 5, and we just felt like if we were really going to go after closing the gap on leakage and hold on, I have to look at this again. And that more synchronicity across the board, not just personal synchronicity, but those of you that are visionaries, those of you that are establishing something you can't explain to anybody either, those of you that are trying to bring things into existence, between the gap between what we presently think is real and what is now becoming real, that we could close that gap and everything could move along in a more grace and ease. It can move along with grace and ease. And we'll know, because those of us that choose to participate in this, we'll see. There'll either be evidence for it or there won't. But we can't take the stress anymore, individually, or those of us who have our own groups. We can't take the stress of the pull on us of the devolutionary path. We don't have time for the human cognition to catch up with itself, because it's still suffering from being highly traumatized from 5 to 12,000 years. But when we come together as a collective on the behalf of everything moving to the next greater whole, a synergistic, catalytic phenomenon, but coherence actually begins to occur, convergence begins to occur. Just like 1986, when we had the harmonic convergence, which was the stars, you could say we're generating our own harmonic conversion out of our paying attention to all of us wanting to move into a greater, more playing field that operates more on behalf of life and what has life exist as whole. I think that's why I wanted you to interview me. I do a lot better when I'm having to explain it to a person than write it on a piece of paper.
It was fun.
So what's going to happen is you all are going to, on Friday, we're going to post this to play on Friday. And then those of you on my Facebook page and for Create a World, and then those of you who are in the actual cultural community of the Field of Tantra Maat, you'll get this video, and then you'll get an invitation to participate. And there's nothing to do. We're just asking you to be one of 5. That's all we're asking. And then we'll bunch everybody in 5s, and like Ezekiel's wheels, we'll pattern our collective energetics in the consciousness of creation. We'll have these monadic 5s, and I can't explain that either. I just want you to know that the fact that this could even be possible, that there could be a collective humanity response. I just happen to know the technology of creating matrices within which new systems can rise that operate on behalf of life and have us exist as whole. That's just my gig. And nobody, people try to find out from a lot of us how things work, but that's like asking your body how it works. You can't really get into it and explain it. And by the time you understand it, whatever needed to happen is over. So it's almost, since the day I began working, which is in 1965, since the day, no, that wouldn't be right. It would be 1965. Since that date, I made myself a promise that I would only operate by request, and I would only offer the opportunity, and I would know that the soul consciousness, the collective consciousness of the one soul human, would respond or not, that there was nothing I could ever say that could talk people in to whatever I was trying to talk them into. So I always worked by word of mouth, and I always worked in my direct link with creation. I'm not really human centric, I'm creation centric. And then human beings that feel this lust to be part of creation again can find their way to me. Not just me, others too. It's not just me. And but we're in an amazing moment in time. Okay, over to you for anything left out or anything yet to cover.
No, I think that pretty much covers it. So basically be who you are and be there.
And be there, be who you are.
Wherever there is for you.
Yeah, beautiful. Really beautiful. And just look for it on the YouTube channel and on my Facebook, Sacred Space for Resting Courage, my personal space, Tapa Talk for the community of the cultural community of Tantra Maat, and WhatsApp, and then also MailChimp. We'll just send it out to everybody in a short period of time. And then I'll be doing this. Oh, I know one thing I left out that's important. So in the ancient traditions, things work differently than they do now. So what happens is in the Wiccan tradition and in the Druidic tradition, one of the Druids or one of the Wiccans would have been recognized as the source point of a collective event. So then they would gather in circle, and then they would feed the power to the particular Wiccan or the particular Druid. And because by feeding them the power, because they, for that moment, not inherent to their personality, for that moment, they were like the lightning rod that was the one that was generating kind of like this whole system response. But it was a collective, the Druids and the Wiccans understood it was a collective activity. It wasn't because of properties that the person individually had, because all of them had those properties, but it was theirs to do. So this is mine to do. And the woman that wants to do it with me has skills and capacities. And I have strength, stamina, capacity to hold that phenomenon. But we're not supposed to hold it alone anymore. We are supposed to hold this as a collective, as a field collective. We're supposed to be not, we don't even have to agree with each other. But then, just like when I do activations, collective group activations, the strength of the collective makes everything move much faster, and as everything have more power, because we're never meant to be isolated. We weren't meant to be saviors. Jesus said that. To thine own self be true. No more self-sacrifice. No more. If people had been a collective that had said, no more, we're going to operate it on behalf of love thy neighbor as thyself. We're going to operate on behalf of loaves and fishes for everybody coming from a higher source power. We wouldn't be dealing with what we're dealing with right now. So for those of you that are in the Christ consciousness, this lends itself a lot to that too. The what happens when a collective comes together on behalf of moving to the next greater whole. So that's why it's me and her, but we want the ripple effect to go out into the wheels, the five five-spoked wheels. Somebody asked what a hub was. It'll just be a hub because we have to have somebody that knows who's holding the space, interim space in between, and they're holding themselves and others. And but it's all, and then we'll see what happens. Each one of you, you'll see how the ripple effect affects your life and affects whatever collective you're moving inside of too. We don't know. We haven't been here before. We're just going to go for it and see what happens. Anything else, Barbara?
Actually, there's one thing I want to ask you about, but I'm not sure this is the right moment.
Go right
It
ahead.
uses the it talks about matter and voluntarily veiling itself within the matter, limiting itself. So we did that. Or did all matter?
Creation does that. Creation does that.
Creation.
So it experiences different dimensional playing fields. And
Okay.
we are creation, whether we like it or not. We just had a
It's
boo-boo.
not punishment. It's just.
No, don't you, it's like Halloween. Don't we all dress up for
We
Halloween?
dress away. Okay.
And then we go have fun and then we take our costume off
Wash them off and
when we're
then you
done
come
with
back.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, this is a longer conversation, but there's a lot of evidence now that systems other than the system of this planet interrupted her evolutionary path and enslaved human beings and altered their way of perceiving themselves, where they're in service of something other than themselves. And that's not how we were designed to be. The lion's designed to be a lion, the lamb, the tree, and human being, a human being, not in service of anything other than life. And we're coming out of that mesmerization. We're coming out of that nightmare. I mean, we can be whatever we want to be in the illusion. We can be whatever we want to be. There's no right or wrong way to be. You will see, especially over the next 3 years.
That's so exciting, actually.
It is exciting. I'm very excited. When I was a little girl, when I was in my teens, well, 11, starting at 11, I saw now, and I didn't believe it, but I kept working on behalf of it, and now I believe it. So off we go. Thanks, honey. Thanks for doing this with me. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
Take care, everybody. Enjoy.
Bye.